Ex-Millionaires of Reddit, what made you lose all your money? Story 1. My dad is an ex-millionaire. He's a wizard at starting successful businesses. His problem is he can't let them go. He's the boss owner who never hires a manager that's not family because he just doesn't trust anyone else to run it. He drove $3 million companies into the ground because he couldn't keep up with his own success, and refused to hire people to do it for him. Story 2. I have a relative who is a self-made millionaire many times over. He was the hardest working person I've ever known. As soon as he graduated from high school, he got his real estate license and became a successful realtor. Within 30 years, he opened a successful construction company, a store that sold kitchen cabinets, and owned over 20 rental properties. This wasn't enough for him, and he started renting out his properties to people that would pay him more to grow pot in. His granite company was used to ship the pot across state lines, and now he's sitting in jail facing a minimum of 10 years. The government is coming after all his rentals and money. I should add he shipped the pot to 9 different states, 7 of which we distill illegal using USPS. You can read more about the case here. @2. Oh my first award. Thank you, kind stranger. Stay safe, everyone. Story 3. Not me technically, but my grandma. So a little backstory. My great-grandparents owned a luxury fur coat business and made an absolute shitload of money. When my grandma and her brother, my great-uncle, had moved out from their parents' house, they were given a sizable amount of money, not millions, but far more than the average person might get in such a situation to fund their adulthood. Great-uncle ended up opening 2 businesses using this money, a gas station and a used car lot. He made pretty good money running these 2 businesses. We'll get back to him a little bit later in the story. Grandma, however, took this money that was given to her and blew a lot of it on fancy clothes, vacations, etc. She then got married to my grandpa and had 3 kids, and then he ended up cheating on her and took a bunch of her remaining money in the divorce. Meanwhile, great-uncle was furthering his business ventures, opening a payphone business, helicopter tours, and all kinds of other. He was rolling in money at this point. Some time later, my great-grandparents died within months of each other. They then split their inheritance 2 ways. 13 of it going to my great-uncle, and 23 going to my grandma. The argument was that he was a wealthy bachelor with no kids, and she was struggling to get by with a secretary job while raising 3 kids by herself. This ticked off my great-uncle quite a bit, since he knew what she had done with her previous huge handout. He was mad about the inheritance not being 50-50, but not something that he'd quit talking to my grandma over. Not yet anyway. So, what do you think my grandma did with her huge windfall of money? Did she open a business? No. Did she invest it in some way? Nah. Did she do absolutely anything productive whatsoever? Of course not. The first thing she did was buy a great big house in a nice neighborhood. Actually, no, wait, that was the second thing she did. The first thing she did was quit her job. Then she bought a luxury car. Then came luxury clothes for my mom, aunt and uncle. Then she hired a full-time live-in maid. Then came the vacations to all the hottest vacation spots of the day. Gourmet meals every day. All the toys and gadgets that they could possibly want. You name it, she bought it. So it should come as no surprise that she burned through the entire inheritance in less than a year, 2/3 of the money that her parents had worked their whole lives for. More money than anyone should reasonably ever be able to spend. She blew through in under 12 months, but she kept spending, driving herself into debt. They lost the house, lost the luxury car, and even had to sell all their fancy clothes and toys, just to pay the enormous debt she had gained. And then she came to my great-uncle's office and asked him for money. She was promptly thrown out by security, and was told that he would never speak with her again, and he never did. Imagine my surprise when I grew up in what was basically the borderline of total poverty, and my family tells me that they used to be filthy stinkin' rich. Because of what my grandma did, my great-uncle more or less cut off contact with her side of the family for years. It wasn't until I was a teenager that I ever met the man. I think later on in his life, he felt bad about punishing the rest of the family when all of the fault lied on my grandma, and he started to talk with us every so often, but we knew to never ask him for anything, even though we were all struggling. When my grandma was on her deathbed, she begged for us to have my great-uncle come to the hospital so she could apologize to him. When told about this, his response was basically, "I don't give a." And then, in an almost ironic twist, he married an obvious gold digger, 30-ish years his junior, who had already survived 2 other dead old rich guys. And then when he died, she got everything, disconnected their phone line, and disappeared like a bandit. His actual family got nothing. TLDR, great-grandparents were rich. Great-uncle becomes a successful businessman. Grandma blows every last penny of their inheritance in record time. Great-uncle cuts off contact with her after she begs him for money. She dies alone. He dies and has his entire inheritance taken by his gold-digging wife. I'm still poor, and I wake up to 4,000 upvotes. Holy, I need to go through all these messages. Story 4. My dad, not me. He made some really shrewd stock market investments after he retired. They were options on an oil refiner at a time when the USA had a real shortage of them. My dad had done a lot of research on this and studied the situation carefully. He got rich to the tune of maybe $2 million. He could have been set for life. My dad was already a really smart guy. He has a PhD in mathematics and was a highly respected big-brain professional all the way back into the 1960s. However, he thought this took him to the next level. He bought a lot of newer options in the same company. I suggested to him that he diversify, put a bunch of money into something closer to an annuity or another conservative investment that would give him plenty of income forever. I told him if he did that, he would always be rich. Well, he is pretty far from that now. I haven't said a thing about that to him since he lost everything. I did what I could at the time to save him from himself, but who was I? It pains me to see how it played out for him. He did a lot of things right in life, he deserved better, but there's no deserve in securities investing. Morals of this story: 1. You aren't an investment genius after your first blockbuster win, you need a track record. 2. Diversify. Story 5. Hypothetical millionaire. I bought 100 worth of Bitcoin when they were about 1 each. I sold them when they were about $2.50 each and was so happy I made money from internet coins. As of the moment I'm typing this, those coins would be worth $1,855,000. Story 6. I watched a guy at a casino somehow get a loan against his house, about $200K, and lose it. He looked suicidal. Apparently he was already in almost $50K and thought he could win it back. I got hired there, and I would leave on Friday and return Monday, and see the same people in the same clothes, who pissed in themselves and were still sitting at the blackjack table gambling. Story 7. Divorce. I was a millionaire, got divorced, which nearly sent me to insolvency, buckled down and worked my butt off and am re-millionaired. Guys, don't underestimate the pernicious impact on net worth a bad divorce can have. Story 8. Crypto millionaire. Still worth a lot. With my accounts about 850,000 today. I have a lot of XRP, but in 2017 I was worth about 3-5 million before the crash. Lowest was 300,000. I'm a hodler, so don't day trade usually. Story 9. Not me but an acquaintance. He got caught not paying taxes and dealing in stolen goods. He spent time in federal prison and lost everything, including his wife. Crime does not always pay. Story 10. First husband was making $1 million a year. He was enjoying life, spending frivolously, but bringing in enough that it didn't matter. We divorced, but amicably. No alimony, no child support. He just paid for whatever the kids needed. Then he got leukemia. He fought like for 3 years. The last 2 years were very expensive. It was worth it. Money won't make you happy, but the lack of it can destroy you. The kids ans. I can take comfort in knowing that truly, there was nothing else possible. His millions bought his kids 2 more years of dad, and am glad for him that he enjoyed his life while he could. Story 11. COVID. Built a business that was given a valuation of a few million back in January, but the industry is now down 80 and am doing all I can to avoid bankruptcy. Story 12. We were close, then the Great Recession hit, lost 60 in 3 years, just updated the balance sheet today. We're almost back. Who knows what will happen in the next 24 to 36 months though. Story 13. My grandfather was a thrifty man, always was a doughy guy, hated hiring contract workers except for my father, whom he introduced to my mother, and worked for nearly 40 years at our local GM plant. His savings, myriad cash deposits, and investments over the years netted him a net worth of about 2 or 3 million. After walking off the job at GM after a scuffle with the plant management, he went into business for himself and became a landscaper and evergreen farmer at 64 years old, earning government contracts with county and local agencies, which netted him another sizable chunk of money. His sister's husband did the same thing essentially, and this is where my aunt comes in. We will call her Karen. Karen worms her way into my great-aunt's life, and as my great-aunt approached her 80s started becoming more frail, and Karen took care of her, which means she had my great-aunt sign over power of attorney and immediately signs everything over to herself. Brand new house, all 3 cars, RV, everything. Consigns my great-aunt to a convalescent home where she died, the will having been officially amended to award everything not already taken by Karen to Karen. My other great-aunt died suddenly and left my mother as her executor of her modest will, which was basically the stuff in her house, as she was in the process of selling the house. I was very young, but I remember Mom loading me and my 2 brothers into the car and flying down the highway to beat Karen to the house before anything turned up missing. We were successful and Mom got to inventory and disperse everything properly. We ended up with, of all things, her turn-of-the-century pasta crank and her big box of recipes. Grandpa by this point had developed cancer and slowed down his business. Now 75 years old, he had a nice, modest house on a nice chunk of extremely valuable land thanks to the explosive development there. Mom takes time off work to help Grandma care for him, until he too passes away, leaving everything to Grandma. At this point, we move into Grandma's house to help her around the house and to help her close and liquidate the business assets. After about a year, Karen worms her way in like a tick and things start disappearing, like farm equipment and other things. Her daughter's husband also had gone into the storage barn and trashed out a lot of family heirlooms, which also was where we kept a lot of our furniture from our home, which all ended up in a fire pit behind the barn. It wasn't long after this that Karen convinced Grandma to let her handle her finances, and Karen evicts us. Within 2 years, they sold the family home and land, liquidated all of Grandpa's stocks and bonds, and fled to Florida. Karen had once again gained power of attorney and legally stole all of Grandma's remaining assets. Grandma died ignominiously when she was given an insulin shot 20 times her supposed dose, and she went into DKA and died slowly and horribly in brain death. Out of an estimated $4 million inheritance, Mom and her 2 sisters were given an equal inheritance of $12,000. Karen kept the house, the cars, and ended up burning through everything. Obviously this ended up shattering the family, and now none of us speak to the other. Edit 9 years and just got my first award. Thank you, you're too kind. Story 14. I built a business worth $3 million, had a house worth $1 million, investments worth more than $2 million, for nice cars, divorce laid me low, an ex-wife, a lawyer, and a judge stripped me of at least 34 of that, left me with a Miata race car, a bit of money and 51 of my company, still had to pay alimony, I gave up. I negotiated my way out of alimony by giving up more of the company, liquidated everything else, bought a boat and off. 26 months later I sailed back into my life and started over. I've earned enough to live a modest retirement, and that's where I am today. Don't get married, boys, it ain't worth it. I've done it twice. The first time was a disaster, the second time was an annoyance, just my opinion and experience. I'm way too drunk and shouldn't have posted. Anyway, there it is. Story 15. ID guess divorce. Maybe fraud as well. Trust me, if you ever win the lotto, every person you have ever met seems like will show up with their hand out. If you want to test that, post on your social media that you won a lottery and see what happens, then let everyone know you won 5, and then drop everyone who asked for money. Story 16. Not me, but a close friend's parents worked at a well-renowned American company in Houston in the early 2000s. They were really high up in the management chain and enjoyed a lot of the perks that came with their position, after sticking through thick and thin, especially during the dot-com bubble. Said friend's parents were also very good in managing their money, living very frugally, and investing for their future nest egg. Unfortunately, therein lied the rub. All that investment, 401 Burmese chots, extra cash etc., was on a single pot. I believed, with all their allocation back in 2000s or so, they have had invested close to 5-6M and was due to pull it out so they could finally retire, but a company scandal brought all that to a collapse. The company, Enron, all their money evaporated. Story 17. I got pretty close by selling my company to a bigger competitor, reinvested most of it since I had not much use for the money, but then got scammed for about $500,000 on buying some real estate. They smelled a newly rich kid from miles away. I still like to think I was worth $1 million at some brief point in time. Edit. Since people are asking, basically I bought a fantastic holiday destination facility from someone who did not own said fantastic holiday destination facility, and with bought I mean a substantial down payment to keep other interested parties at bay. Classic. Story 18. I work in finance and my team and I work with all very affluent clients. I've seen so many millionaires lose it all not from investing in the markets, but from taxes, lifestyle and poor business decisions. Once had a client who was making $50K a month, but was spending $60K a month and perpetually dipping into his investments. There were months where payments bounced because he was living a lifestyle and always wanted more. My favorite investment advice: same car, same house, same spouse. Story 19. Technically not me but rather my family. My great-grandfather was born to a long line of vicars who had land, properties and farms. They were loaded. He was the rebel only son and swore that he would break tradition. So he joined the army and come World War II he was shipped off to fight for Britain. While overseas, he was captured and spent a few years in a POW camp where he subsequently found Jesus. After the war, he returned, joined the clergy, and his father having died, gave every single penny to the goddamn church, land, property and titles all, and lived of his vicar's salary. Obviously it was never mine to lose, but the knowledge that I could have been a lord with a horse and an affordable coke addiction really stings. Story 20. Not me but my great-grandfather started a candy company that serviced most of the Wyoming Valley in PA. My grandfather his son sold the company for upwards of $100 million. My mother and I are unsure of the full amount. He used the money to buy some land down in Florida, franchised a few radio shacks, and bought a lot of cars. During this time he divorced my grandmother and married another woman with children. Towards the end of his life, he reconnected with my mother and met me, but then developed brain cancer. He decided to cut his wife out of his will and give all of his money, still around $10 million, to my mother and her brother. Because he was bedridden he had to have his lawyer email and print out the new will which he would sign and mail out to the lawyer, but he asked his wife that he was screwing over to mail the new will, but for some reason it got lost. He died a few days later with my mother unaware the will change hadn't gone through. She paid for the funeral only to learn afterwards from her lawyer that the will was never changed. She went to confront her stepmother only to find out that she and her sons had already flown to Florida, taken the money and moved. She tried for a few years to sue, but due to state laws and lack of written evidence couldn't get the suit off the ground. And that's how my mother lost a multi-million-dollar inheritance and got stuck with a $50,000 funeral bill. Story 21. A lot of people who win the lottery will blow their money on big purchases, like a house or a yacht, then they have no money left to pay the yearly costs of those items, and they lose everything. Invest all your money in safe stocks, get a mortgage on a house, and chill the out if you win the lottery. Story 22. Not me, but my parents, both smart people, went to the best universities, graduated with BAs and masters in architecture, went on to design very high-end apartments and homes all over Queensland, Australia, saved up enough to open a Michelin-style restaurant on the water. It was a hit. They became incredibly wealthy, and this is where money started to take a toll on them. They went all out, bought 2 penthouses in the same building and combined them into one. Owned and managed multiple high-end apartments all over the city, bought multiple sports cars, and even a yacht. Took my sister and I traveling all around the world. My life growing up was literally a model's Instagram page. But then one day a flood came. The restaurant went completely underwater and destroyed close to $1 million worth of wine, and not to mention the write-off on the kitchen. They were ruined. They had to sell everything just to cover the cost of the restaurant. They now live in a small apartment and are both still working over 70 to pay off all the loans they still owe. Word of warning, if you come into possession of a large sum of money, don't be stupid. Story 23. I wasn't quite a millionaire, was better off, got investigated for being a kingpin, am not, life ruined, now I'm homeless and dying, you'll never financially recover from this. JPG. Story 24. My dad had over $20 million in a business with 12 locations and 3 more opening on the way. An employee who was caught selling drugs fabricated an elaborate story that he got the drugs from my dad's company, and that the whole company was a front for the Mexican cartels. My dad spent a lot of time in Mexico back in the day and had a criminal record, so that was enough for the DEA to raid him on this story. They stole all the computers, terrorized the employees, and raided every one of the locations on the same day with over 300 SWAT, including a raid on his own home. He wasn't there, just his young children there traumatized by it. They found nothing, absolutely nothing, all papers in order, no indictments came, no case. Regardless, most of the employees and management quit due to the investigation. He had to close most locations and sell after less than a year at a huge loss just to pay for the lawyers to defend his case. The worst part is that they won't admit they found nothing. The DA spent millions on this raid. So they've left the case open indefinitely, making it impossible for him to work in his field. His lawyers said the prosecution has privately asked him seriously to find something wrong that he can plead to so they can save face. He won't lie, so they won't close the case. The government took my dad's life's work, his savings, and ruined hundreds of others' lives, and we have zero recourse. Story 25. My great-grandparents were farmers and lived in North Dakota. In their prime, their team and them were absolutely great farmers. This along with some other factors made them super rich. For an example, they owned multiple planes and even had a hangar built to store them. They also had a really nice house, not a mansion, but a really nice and large one. Well, it turns out they were really great at farming but not so much at paying taxes. Story 26. Not me. My mom. My grandfather died and left everything to my mom. My father died and left everything to my mom. Mom always thought she was a smart gambler that would win. And as proof she won something like $25,000 in the lottery once and went out and bought a car that just got her hooked good. When Dad was alive, he didn't let her gamble. He kept it under control. After Dad died, Mom found a boyfriend, a former bookie who was a professional gambler. They used to like going to the Indian casinos where they subsequently squandered every single penny and more. As my sister told me, that Mom, after selling the big house for another $500,000 and buying a small little condo, has now taken out a home improvement loan against the condo for $50,000. No improvements were ever made. Casinos and lottery tickets, a cool $1 or $2 gone. Story 27. I was a flight attendant and once had a passenger in FC out of Vegas who looked distraught, handed me a 20 and said, "Please keep the bourbon coming." In flight, he just drank. Looking down, I asked how he was doing. He said he was trying to figure out how to tell his wife he had lost their home gambling. That was the moment I decided I would never participate in a town that made its money that way. Story 28. Oxy and crack, 1,500 a day habit got me high for a few years. Then the other half was when the dealers infiltrated and took me for tens of thousands at a clip. Oh, and a sibling stealing $400K was a dent as well. It's truly a miracle I'm alive. 9 years removed and finally dug myself out and back on top. Kind of all. Story 29. My mom's second husband was a millionaire. Our family and his first family treated everything as one big family. When he got cancer, he set a very intricate and fair system. Then he appointed 3 people to oversee any emergency changes to his estate: my mom, his first wife, and her second husband. As soon as he died, they voted against my mother to throw away his whole plan and just give them themselves the money, 50-50. Story 30. My ex's mom, not me. She grew up as a trust fund kid in a tremendously rich Jewish family in New York. When she turned 18, she decided to see the world, so she moved to Israel, then Iraq, then France. She spent 30 years moving from country to country, burning her money away like it was unlimited. But as it turns out, trust funds are actually finite, and one day she found herself with just barely enough left to get back the US and buy a tiny house. Her family had at that point long since disowned her, so she had to get a job. Only what do you do when you have no prior work experience, no credentials beyond high school, and you're 48 years old? Answer: housekeeping at the local Best Western, apparently. Until they fire you for rocking the boat too much. She proposed a bunch of changes within her first couple of months there, most of which being rather expensive and offering no real benefit beyond "I think it would look nice." Then, you drive a short bus for senior citizens. Until you turn the wrong way down a one-way street, panic at the sight of oncoming traffic, and steer straight into fire hydrant, then flee the scene, abandoning the company vehicle and its several now injured passengers. Story 31. 12 years ago, I was making $95K as a software engineer. I was in an accident, suffered a brain injury, lost everything, and haven't worked as a programmer since then. My injury easily cost me $1 million. Edit for anyone asking, I was a DBA SQL server for the most part, with a dash of Oracle. I was also a whiz with JavaScript, CSS, and Cold Fusion all the way back to 1996. After my injury, I couldn't even read my own code, which was literally pristine. Story 32. I'd like to add something because it's so ridiculous. My uncle and aunt inherited a lot of money. They paid to get a Speedway fire truck restored that went straight to a storage unit. Wasn't even their Zellol. They took multiple trips to monster truck races, WWE events, and the casino. The funniest thing of all was they needed a new car badly but decided against it. They blew through all their money in less than a year and are now making car payments. How stupid. Story 33. I have a rich uncle whose father owned a big chain of gas stations and some oil fields in Turkey. When the father died and the uncle took over, he didn't give any about the businesses, was just partying and squandering everything, like he bought basically a new luxury car every week, and boats. And every few months he would move into a new luxury home and buy 100 new furniture for it and just threw the old stuff away. After some years it all collapsed and he had to sell everything to a big US corp when hitting insolvency. Everyone in the family hates him now. Well, he was always an entitled. But guess what? Despite being an unproductive loser, he managed to marry a bank director. She is rich as and continues to sponsor his stupid lifestyle. Basically his sugar mummy. For some people consequences just don't seem to exist. I mean, how can you go broke owning oil fields? It boggles my mind. And every time we are visiting family in Turkey and drive from Istanbul to the city where my family is coming from, we are passing like 20 gas stations that used to have our family's name on them. Story 34. Gave most of it away in the divorce. Took what I thought would be enough to pull a leaving Las Vegas. But Ben Sanderson had a big head start on me on the liver damage, so I outlived the money, started over from zero 16 years ago, halfway back. Story 35. COVID. My parents have tons of money in stocks and lost their millionaire status due to the crash that happened. I'm talking tens of thousands in a day at one point. Thankfully, with the drug trials being successful, they're starting to make back their money, though it's still not where it was before due to the industry they have stock in being hit hard by the shutdowns. Make matters worse, my father is at 12 pay since he works hospitality. Story 36. I was worth $1 million 2 weeks ago for the first time. Tech stocks, they fell, and now I'm worth like $900K, the most boring yet truthful answer I have for you. Story 37. My cousin was a big rapper in the 90s. When I say his name, you probably know him or heard his music. It is still used today in the USA. Anyway, he became a millionaire really fast at 20-something years old after being a dishwasher. His manager made him sign bad contracts, and almost all of the money after a year or two went to his manager and accountant. He is still doing okay producing some music in Los Angeles, but not a millionaire anymore. Story 38. My family lost tons of money with a failed business and bad investments, and ended up with tons of debt and a bad financial situation. They weren't millionaires or anything though. Story 39. COVID and divorce. We were invested in a small brewery that did not make it through COVID. We had 2 rental properties generating income and vacation spots that were shut down due to COVID. Had to sell one off at a huge loss. Ex-wife then wanted a divorce and raked me over the coals. I won the other rental in the divorce, and that's about it. The assets. I wish I had my dog back. Maybe you need to read about all the lottery winners that lost their money by buying and doing stupid. Story 40. Not a millionaire, but I was super close. Hope that counts. Was in my early 20s and had a ton of cash saved up from investing hard work. Had a rough childhood, so I was kinda empathetic towards others. I regularly volunteered at an orphanage in my city for reference. Used all of my money to buy houses, vehicles, and anything else life-changing for strangers these past few years. I don't really regret it. I do think back to times where I used to have a really luxurious lifestyle, 6-star hotels, concierge, fine dining, sports cars, but when I think about all those times people came to me crying and begging to help them escape their situation, I could only shrug and think to myself, why hasn't anyone else helped them out? What kind of cruel world do we live in to the point where I had to be the 10,000th person they had to ask to help them out? What is wrong with people? So, I did what I could. I'd like to hope someday, if there is a God or higher being out there, that they show me at least a gram of mercy when it's my time to be judged after death. Story 41. Not me but my grandma. She started a shoe company. It became one of the biggest retails in the south part of the country. Then as her retiring days got here, she passed it on to her kids who ran it to the ground. She came out of retirement, and within a year she got out of debt and made it profitable again, then went back to retirement. They ran it back to the ground and even put a mortgage on her house. She let it fall and the company no longer exists. She saved her house with her saving and she lived a comfortable retirement from money on properties she unwed. Story 42. A family member of mine has been a millionaire several times over, but he loses it on ex-wives, fiancés and girlfriends young enough to be his grandchildren. They appear to require a lot of financial maintenance. Story 43. And was almost a millionaire. Oh boy. Here we go. I met my so a few years ago when AMD and Tesla were wicked low, before Tesla merged with SolarCity. Well, I was making pretty good money back then and living like a homeless person, minimal spending, driving a shitty car, etc., all while putting 90 of my money on AMD and Tesla stocks. The thing is, I knew shitbag about stocks and was just curious about investing. So basically all my money, I'm talking all of it, was in stocks, and when I met my so all of a sudden I needed better clothes, a better car, money for movie tickets, etc. At the time my paycheck would go directly to Schwab and I would live on 10 that would go on my credit union again. Like I said, I was borderline homeless. I'm a garbage man and my paychecks were and still are actually pretty good. But all of a sudden I needed money ASAP, so I sold all the stocks at a minimum profit, like double my investment, and spent it all on an apartment, an M3, dress clothes, fuckton of dress shoes, simple things I overlooked like razor blades, etc. My stock money didn't last very long, and thinking back to it, I should have just readjusted my deposit percentages to 10 Schwab 90 credit union, because I needed money ASAP. Well, suffice to say that today I would have been worth many $1 million. My friend now am worth. I'm a father now, a family man, a slumlord. Just kidding, I'm a pretty good landlord, but I made the mistake to rent a family, and they don't pay rent, so my main income goes to paying mortgages while netting zero income until the courts deal with them. Money is not that big of an issue at our home, but I no longer have the surplus to buy stocks like I used to. I kick myself in the for being so young and naive and say to myself, if only I had a father figure to mentor me about these things. I have a father, but he's a moron who abandoned us as kids to chase. There is light at the end of the tunnel though. I'm not worth much, actually. I'm not worth anything, but I do max out my 401k every year, and that's what I'm most proud of, even though it's hard sometimes. I don't have the discipline or patience for the stock market, so I put down $20 a week on Schwab stock slices, which is a fun way to gamble, buy and hold. I own a few income properties that I'm hoping turn a profit eventually when my tenants start paying rent again, so there's that. I was almost a millionaire, my friends. Funny to think about it. I don't blame my wife, by the way. It was my fault for saving all my money and living on so little, where I neglected having a wardrobe and good things overall, so when I met her I needed everything. I left the Schwab account open and recently logged into it again after the crash in March. That's when I decided to double down on 401k and get back in the stock game. I'm a buy and hold type of guy, but man, I should have just readjusted my deposits and I would have been swimming in the dough. Who knows, maybe I'm meant to be a slave to the dollar. My mother's family, it was the separation of India and Pakistan. My mother's family was crazy rich in now Pakistan. I'm talking mansion, maids, businesses and repute, but because of the socio-political unrest between Hindus and Muslims, they had to pack up everything and move in with their relatives in India. Her grandfather sent the family here India overnight and stayed back in Pak disguised as a Muslim. He had to stay undercover for 3 months so he could wrap up some financial affairs. His family could have no contact with him because being identified as a Hindu could have gotten him killed in that situation. They could only hope he was alive. He had to let go of much of their wealth, but brought a bunch of big solid gold bricks with him so his family could start a new life here. He first went to Bombay and gave the bricks to a goldsmith, telling him to coat them with silver. Traveling to a smaller town with so much gold was risky, and silver didn't really cost as much then. When he reached his destination, he gave the bricks to another goldsmith to have the silver coating removed and evaluated for their worth in cash. Turns out his gold bricks were swapped for solid silver bricks.